Our first speaker is Kimber Lanning. She's an entrepreneur, business leader, and community development specialist who works to cultivate self-reliant communities and inspire higher quality of life for people across Arizona. Kimber's the founder and executive director of Local First Arizona Foundation, a statewide organization focusing on building sustainable and resilient local economies in the state. Kimber's also founder of Local First Arizona, the largest advocacy organization for independently owned businesses in North America. It's kind of a big deal, I think, for having that here in Arizona. She's received numerous awards for her diverse work and extensive leadership and speaks regularly around the country. And her work in promoting adaptive reuse in Phoenix's urban core was recognized by the American Planning Association, who presented Kimber with a Distinguished Citizen Planner Award in 2013. She's also been named one of the 50 most influential women in Arizona by Arizona Business Magazine in 2011. Our second speaker, I guess, is kind of a newbie to Local First Arizona. I think he just joined the organization recently, but Jason Lowry will be our second speaker. He's Director of Sustainability Initiatives at Local First Arizona. Jason returned to Arizona from Texas in 2020 to make it his
so I'm just going to chime in. I'm having significant technical difficulties this morning. And so now I'm outside the Sedona Public Library. So I missed introduction entirely. And am I going now?
Wait
okay, I can't
2 or 3 more minutes and then okay. I'm trying to give the bios of all of our speakers up front, so we don't have to interrupt the flow. Since joining Local First Arizona, Jason's worked to increase the reach and impact of Local First Arizona's statewide sustainability programs, which include Scale Up, the Green Business Certification Program, and the Charge Ahead Challenge. Our final speaker is going to be Kelly Liska. She's a member of the Local First Arizona Sustainability Team, and as Sustainability Coordinator, Kelly supports the implementation of the Arizona Green Business Certification Program in Tucson and the Scale Up Project Planning Program. Kelly has a Bachelor's of Science from Arizona State University in Conservation Biology and Ecology, and is a Pima County Master Naturalist. Born and raised in Tucson, Kelly has a passion for supporting diverse human and non-human communities that call the Sonoran Desert home. So I think now we'll turn things over to Kimber.
Thank you, everybody. And again, I apologize. I had not intended to be sitting outside right now. So my first question for you, and this is probably a question for Stuart, is this group that you've assembled today similar to the group that you had before? In other words, is there a lot of overlap, and should I dive into the economics of Local First Arizona, or would you prefer that we jump to the more environmental side?
I'll tell you, we were all struck last time by the big picture of what you're doing.
Okay.
And we've got enough folks who are new to hearing about your organization about that.
Fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and get started then. Kelly, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen.
Got it.
That's what we prepared, Stuart. I just wanted to double check. Great. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you all so much for your time. I'm excited to talk to you about the work at Local First Arizona, and anybody has any questions at all, please don't hesitate to just chime right in. So when we talk about the work of Local First Arizona, it's important that, when we talk about a diverse array of aspects that impact all of our lives, they're all systems that contribute to our everyday world. And many people don't really think about those systems, but they're always at play behind the scenes. They can be food systems, they can be financial systems, economic systems, and other systems. And our goal is to bring decision-making and bring those systems as close to home as we possibly can, because we believe that For example, we'll take the financial system. The closer the control of money is to home, the more compassionate that money is going to be, and the more directed at the community needs it will be. So in the last 40 years of globalization, we've really disconnected ourselves from our food system, our financial system, et cetera. And we actually turn on the nightly news and they would have us believing that, our local economy is something somebody far away from us is going to fix, when in fact, we're sitting in the driver's seat, right? We are the economy. We're in a consumer-driven economy, and the choices we make actually impact the outcome of the communities where we live. So I put this quote up here because it is such a, Wendell Berry is a brilliant poet and author. If you don't know him, I highly recommend him. He does a lot. He's a farmer turned poet, and his writing is actually, I would say he's one of the leading writers this century. And he reminds us that a good community ensures itself by trust, by good faith, and by goodwill. And as I mentioned, that means that our economy and our community have to be localized. Our decision-making needs to be as local as it can be in order to have the best possible outcomes in our communities. So next slide, please. So who are we? We really strive to build equitable systems for our local businesses and communities. And we strive to make sure that we're supporting a vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable Arizona economy. And we do this through a lot of different programmatic areas. I see Laura is with us today. Laura joined Local First when I believe we only had 2 staff. So she's seen us for the whole journey. Today we have 42 staff, and we're working on a wide variety of programs that are aimed at our vision, which is to build a resilient and increasingly self-reliant Arizona and Arizona communities. We want to be inclusive of all residents. So we can't just make an economy that works for some of us without considering all of us and the interconnectivity of all of us, right? There are people that think that if I better my own situation, I'll be okay. When in reality, our own destiny and our own situation is intertwined with the communities where we live. And we want to build a thriving and entrepreneurial community that is innovative and has access to capital. And that's that financial system I mentioned, which is the pesky behind the scenes system that we think about the least, but which impacts us the most. And then we want it to be environmentally regenerative. So as we think about all of these different aspects, we've worked hard to create a series of programs that directly impact the outcomes that we seek. So why do we talk about localism, and why is localism so important? As I described, connection to place is a big one, and I'll dive into that a little bit more. Jobs, economics, and self-reliance. These are all reasons that we support localizing the decision-making related to all the different systems that are at play. So next slide. So I like to talk about, and some of you have seen this before, but some of this may be new to you. I like to talk about Chicago because we have so many people here in Arizona that moved here from Chicago, and they won't stop telling us how great Chicago is, right? And this is a true story. I was standing in line next to a woman, and she was telling me how great Chicago was. And then she leaned in sort of confidentially and said, "Boy, you guys sure have made a mess out here in Arizona," right? And I was fired up by that, because I'm an Arizona girl, and I thought, who are you to come out and insinuate that that we don't have it together? And as I thought about her comments, I did my internal eye roll, but as I thought about her comments, I thought she said, "You guys." And so I said, "Oh," I pushed back on her a little bit. I said, "You don't live here." And she said, "No, I live here." I said, "Oh, you haven't lived here very long then?" And she said, "No, I've lived here 15 years. So I said to her, "Well, who the hell is you guys? You live here now. You're one of us," right? And she was othering, thinking that the decision-making had nothing to do with her and that she was just here as a relative newcomer at 15 years. So I started to think about how that disconnect impacts us economically. And this would have been all the way back when I started Local First in 2003. So I decided to do my own little independent survey, and I went around and interviewed everybody that I could find from Chicago. And I asked them one question. I said, "Just tell me why you love Chicago so much." And without realizing it, without even considering what they were saying, every one of them told me the locally owned businesses. They said, in Chicago, I had the same barber for 40 years, and I come out here to Arizona and all you guys have is Supercuts. And I was like, wow, give me 20 minutes. I'll find you 20 barbers. And they'd say, oh, really? Where? They said, man, I used to love my old neighborhood. I'd jump up into my favorite cafe and pop into my booth, and they'd yell from the back, hey, Steve, you want the regular? Right? That's an example of a locally owned business. They said things like, I love to window shop with all the little boutiques that were in my neighborhood or my favorite part of town. They even said things like, I bank at the same bank my great grandparents banked at. Those are all examples of conducting commerce with people close to home, essentially with neighbors, and how that endeared them to that place and really connected them to that place. And so oftentimes those people, having not identified that's what connected them to that place, they move to Arizona and throw that behavior out the window. And they end up in all the big box and big chains, and they never connect here in the same way. So they can live here 15 years and still be pining for wherever they came from. Next slide, please. So luckily, this wasn't just us at Local First. We really strive to put local businesses out there as a strategy to better connect people to place, because we know that local business provides the culture and flavor that's uniquely ours. But the Knight Foundation did this study called Soul of the Community that showed beyond just the connection that I'm talking about, the people who love their place are also more likely to vote, volunteer, give charitably, and they're even more likely to pay their taxes without complaining, because they know those taxes are going to go towards fixing up their local community, parks, libraries, fire departments, and all those things that are essential to our quality of life. Next slide, please. So I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit now, and now we're going to move away from just connection to place, and we're going to talk about how the economy actually works. And again, some of you have seen this slide, but for those of you who haven't, on the left side of the screen is 15 Starbucks logos representing 15 Starbucks locations in Tucson, Arizona. On the right-hand side is 15 random coffee shops, locally owned, from across Arizona, as examples of local businesses. So I'm going to first, I'm going to joke that, most people will say, they'll take their Starbucks cup and hide it under the table when I'm giving a talk in front of a room full of people, because they think I'm going to pick on Starbucks, but I'm actually not. I would call Starbucks the best chain out there. And I have two reasons for that. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and take a guess at why I think Starbucks is the best chain out there?
They secretly donate to Local First Arizona.
No, actually, I wouldn't take their money, but that's a funny guess. I would not take Starbucks money, but I do think they're the best out there. So most people will say, well, they have great customer service. They write your name on the cup. They're consistent, those kinds of, they're everywhere. Those are not my reasons. Those are all true, but they're not my reasons. So number one, they offer healthcare benefits for their employees. So why do I care, right? Well, about 25 years ago, American big corporate retail and restaurant, they made a shared decision when they realized if we just stop offering healthcare for our employees, those employees will shift over to the state's healthcare plan. So, for example, Walmart, at their peak, they were the largest employer in the state of Arizona, and 83% of their employees had no healthcare benefits. Those employees were all on the state's healthcare plan. So I'm going to ask you, who was paying for that? We were. Right? So imagine all of these chains not offering healthcare benefits, all of them going over to the state's healthcare plan, and we're paying for all of them. Meanwhile, we think we're paying cheaper prices, right? So what I like, for those of you who are business people in the room, we call that deferred billing. That's the reality, is we were just paying for it in a different way. It wasn't a cheaper price at all. So that's why I think Starbucks is great. They actually pay for the healthcare of their employees, and we appreciate that. The second reason is they're not in the business of subsidies, right? And so what do I mean by that? A lot of chain stores, they come to our economic development teams in Tucson and Tempe and Phoenix and Glendale, and they say, hey, we're going to bring this value of this big, well-known brand, and you ought to pay us to be here. and our economic development teams pay, and they use our taxpayer money to pay that. So again, back to Walmart as an example, Walmart is the one who invented what they call the sales tax abatement. So what that means is you go in and you buy whatever it is that you're buying at Walmart, and you pay your sales tax, and they actually get to keep it for 10 years. So let's talk about massive subsidies because they're everywhere, right? Walmarts were averaging $10 million per store, again, at their height when they were moving into our communities and then not offering healthcare. So they get to keep our sales tax. We paid them $10 million per store, and we paid for the healthcare of all their 83% of their employees. So you can see that those prices are actually not looking so cheap anymore, right? So now let's get back to the slide. We got 15 Starbucks locations here in Tucson, Arizona. You spend your money thinking it's just a latte. How much could it matter? So let's take a guess. How many graphic design firms in Tucson does Starbucks hire? Right. Stuart's got it, 0. How about website developers? No. How about payroll service providers or accountants or attorneys? Right. It's a long list. You get my point. It's a long list. Those are called secondary jobs, and it turns out they make the world go round. All of those secondary jobs are critical to the conditions in our local communities. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you had 15 coffee shops that hired 15 local graphic designers, or 15 website developers, or 15 payroll service providers or bookkeepers. That keeps dollars recirculating in the community. So you can imagine thinking like a hacky sack passing from person to person. So the dollars move through the economy and they come back to us if we're smart. Smart in the sense that we want to keep those dollars moving through our economy and benefiting as many people as we can. So then we can think about, let's say, the janitorial supply company that keeps the offices clean at the accounting firm. And the accounting firm is only here because the local businesses hire them. So it's so important that we recognize the way we spend our money actually matters to the number of jobs and businesses that exist in our local economy. So if you go back to Starbucks, we could blow this up and have 100,000 Starbucks locations across the nation, and they're still only going to support one graphic design firm, one website developer, one accounting firm, right? They're massive firms and they do create some jobs, but not nearly the diversified wealth of supporting that many independent, locally owned businesses. So next slide. So we know now that for every 2 jobs a big national chain creates, they eliminate 3 local jobs in our economy. And so this is part of free commerce, but we shouldn't be paying for this, right? We shouldn't be paying using our taxpayer dollars. Okay, so next slide. So this slide gives us a sense of what's happening with the online world of Amazon. On the left-hand side, you can see for every $10 million that Americans spend with independent retailers, we create and sustain 110 jobs. For the same exact $10 million spent in chain retailers, we create and sustain only 50 jobs. And we've known that, by the way, for the last 20, 25 years. That's not new. But this new study shows that for every 10 million that we spend on Amazon, we create and sustain only 14 jobs. So it's important, I'm not here to say anybody's an awful person for shopping on Amazon. Our goal at Local First is just to educate and inform people about the choices they have. And if they have a choice to spend some of that money locally, it has a positive impact on the local economy. And I'm also here to just say that the choices we make directly impact the overall American economy, and that clearly that's not a sustainable model. It's just simply not sustainable. Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, is the wealthiest man the world has ever known. And he is that because of the choices we made. We created him because we decided that it was convenient and because we don't understand how the actual economy works. So let's move on. And I also could say a few words about them violating antitrust laws and other things, but that's a whole other talk. So again, we're here to encourage people to support locally owned businesses, not to demonize those that don't. So as a result, we came up with a campaign called the 10% Shift. And it was a study that was actually done in a community, Grand Rapids, that was similar in size to Tucson. And it showed that if everyone in that community could shift just 10% of their spending from a national to a locally owned business, it would create $130 million new dollars recirculating in that community, as well as 1,600 brand new jobs. So as we potentially head into an economic downturn, it's going to be very, very important for us to think about every dollar that we spend and how can we spend it locally when there's an option to do so. And it's not always difficult. Sometimes it's easy. Oftentimes people's cynicism comes out and they'll say, well, they don't make socks anymore in Arizona. Well, I know, but you don't have to buy your socks hand knitted down the street from somebody's aunt. That's not what we're saying, but you can choose Arizona brands like Shamrock, which employs thousands of people here in Arizona, like Harkins Theaters. You have the Loft in Tucson. There's plenty of ways with everyday thing, getting a local oil change, getting a local haircut, things like that actually really do matter. And it also matters if you're selecting businesses that are paying attention to our environment. And then you get the twofer. They're locally owned and they're greening up their business. So next up, Kelly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that financial sector because I think this is critically important. Local First Arizona runs a campaign that's called Move Your Money, where we're encouraging people to move their money into locally owned banks, banks where we have local decision making. So this is what I call a sleeper issue in Arizona, because this is not something our leadership is paying attention to. But consider that access to capital is like oxygen in the room. Businesses need the ebb and flow of being able to borrow when they need to borrow. Borrowing to shore up sales at the holidays, they need to buy extra inventory. Borrowing to expand, grow, hire new people, offer new services. Those things are critically important. Well, here in Arizona, we have a strain on access to capital because we have so much money deposited in non-local banks. When Local first started in 2003, we had 96% of our money deposited in non-local banks. So we've essentially, that's government, business, and individuals. We've said, take our money and invest it somewhere else because they were not lending here in Arizona. They would do some loans, but certainly not small loans, the size that our small businesses needed. In fact, most big banks don't even consider a loan less than $250,000, which is not only difficult to qualify for, it's simply more than most of our businesses need. Of that 96%, we had 76% of those dollars just in Chase, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America. And those three banks, if you Google them, you can Google any of their names and the word redlining. Redlining means that they literally do not lend in communities that are a majority people of color. There was a study that was done less than 2 years ago on Chase. It was like a sting operation at Chase where anybody with a perceived ethnic name was 35% less likely to get a call back on a home loan. Not even just a simple question. Here's my name. I'd like to get a mortgage. I'd like to learn more about buying a home. 35% less likely to even get a call back. So it's really important that if that doesn't match your values, doesn't match my values, that we simply move our money out of those banks. That money is working for somebody when it's out of your vision. When you don't know, you've made a deposit, they've invested it somewhere. Those three banks are heavily invested in privatized prisons, coal, oil, and every nightmare thing that you could possibly think about. So if you move that money back to a local bank or a credit union, it can make a big difference. In Tucson, we have partnerships with Vantage West, Hughes, and a variety of other locals, Alliance Bank and a few others. So I put Colorado up here as an example because they have so much control over their money. We have 13 community banks here in Arizona, 13. Every single neighboring state to us has more than 200 community banks. So we're sort of a worst case scenario, and we need to pay attention to this issue. I'm proud to say that through our Move Your Money campaign, we have moved 8.5% market share out of Chase, Wells, and Bank of America. And that's no small number, 8.5% over the last 8 years. Significant, right? So next slide.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of
about
course.
the previous slide.
Yeah.
Is there a distinction between identifying the First Bank as a community bank and also identifying them as a private bank?
Absolutely. So they are family owned and operated, so they're not traded on the stock market. There's no people around the globe that own shares, and their local decision making is right there. So let's say if you walked through Larimer Square in downtown Denver, and there are all of these different projects and businesses. You could go around and say, who funded this, who funded this, who funded this, and they will all tell you First Bank. In the state of Colorado, First Bank is bigger than Bank of America.
Kimber, while we're pausing, we're at 25 minutes until our break. So I just wanted to give you a time check.
Yep.
There.
I'm
We're
right at
on
the
the edge
end.
of our seats.
Yeah, and I'm going to hand it over to my team. Thank you for the reminder. Next up. So that's just the Move Your Money campaign, and we can skip past that. And I think it's time for me to hand it over to Kelly. The last thing I will say is we work with a lot of rural businesses, or actually, am I handing it to Jason? I'm not quite sure. I missed the intro, so I apologize. So we are working with small towns and locally owned businesses. You know, I like to joke that we can't tell you to go local if local sucks. That's just the honest truth. So we work, part of our programming is to work with those local businesses to make sure they're more competitive. And next slide. And I won't read that to you. I'll let my teammates take it away from here.
Great, thanks, Kimber. So go ahead and move to the next one, Kelly, please. So these different arms of Local First. Go to the next one, please. Okay, so the sustainability team within Local First, there are, in my mind, three main pillars of the sustainability team and focuses of our work. The first is, of course, promoting environmental stewardship amongst our small business community in Arizona. Connected to that is making sure that we increase equity in terms of access to these types of services across all of our communities and business owners in low income, communities of color, et cetera. And last one is making sure that the sustainability work we are working with these businesses to achieve is helping to build economic resilience to further strengthen and develop an inclusive and diverse economy. Okay, and so the sustainability team's projects are really looking at those three pillars in terms of the work that we're working on. Go ahead and next one. And so what does that look like? In essence, the sustainability team provides technical assistance as well as educational and educational opportunities and consultations to businesses to really live those three aspects out. Next. And so the first program I want to just briefly mention is the Arizona Green Business Certification. This is in essence a self-guided process that's led by the local business in consultation with the sustainability initiatives team that helps to identify areas where businesses are already doing great in terms of sustainability practices, to identify areas where they can improve, and to come up with not just a list of areas to go, but a concrete plan to realize those changes, as well as information about rebates, et cetera, that can really help businesses realize that in the short term. Go ahead and go to the next one, please. And so kind of the different facets of this program, businesses who complete the Arizona Green Business Certification receive recognition from Local First Arizona's marketing. So this is, you know, sharing the good news of the good practices. They get a customized plan to the specific business to really help them identify where can they make investments to really move their sustainable practices forward. Again, I mentioned rebates. Those are very important. We really emphasize kind of the low-hanging fruit to help these businesses realize the types of savings they need to, you know, pad the bottom line. Connected to that marketing, they get to grow loyalty amongst customers who are looking for green businesses in the Tucson area. And they also are recognized as a sustainability leader in the community. Go to the next one. And so this is just kind of, in essence, the process from the start, which is reaching out to local first, getting the initial consultation, businesses completing the checklist, working with local first team to come up with a report and that plan and recommendations. And then upon completion of all of that, the business becomes certified and gets that type of marketing and public recognition. And we're just going to lift up one of the companies from the Tucson area that has gone through that, Company Eco, online retailer that uses sustainability ratings for each product. It was certified in 2020. You can see the mission, just a couple of things I want to lift up. One of the practices that they're getting recognized for is they run 100% of their operations through rooftop solar. Important, they protect wastewater, which we know, or they protect our water sources by not using pesticides or fertilizers. They use all native xeric landscaping to minimize water use. They're very attentive to their waste and reuse and recycling policies. So in essence, Company Eco is getting recognized for all of these good practices that protect the environment, that save Company Eco money on a monthly basis, and again, that are really allowing our small locally owned businesses to thrive and to do business and build a more diverse and equitable economy here in Arizona. Kelly?
Awesome. I'm just going to talk about our other program, Scale Up, and then really briefly about a couple of the other things that we've worked on in the past few months that are updates to our last presentation. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. So if you want any more detail or want to ask questions, you can reach out to us. We can give you our info in the chat at the end, whatever works. Okay, so Scale Up is a 7-week cohort-based program. Businesses sign up, they become a part of a cohort, often that is run through Zoom, because we work with businesses from all over the state, about half of them in Tucson and Southern Arizona. And what differentiates this from the certification is really focusing in on project planning. So part of that is benchmarking, really focusing on building resilience as we've mentioned and talked about, and cost savings, and also considering community impact, and not just, saving energy, saving water. And really holding those to be both important parts of sustainability. So they, as a cohort, businesses go from education, learning, collaboration, into project planning. They give us a pitch for their project basically at the end of the cohort, and then we support them for an entire year after the cohort ends in implementing their project. So what we really focus on during the cohort is different areas of sustainability, and we have connected 5 different local experts as facilitators for each week. So we focus on water, energy, waste, transportation, and a culture of sustainability. So including developing a green team and really bringing it all together in a business setting. And included in all that is social impact, equity, and environmental justice considerations. So this is kind of the structure and what we talk about each week. Again, I'm not going to read it all out, but we meet once a week via Zoom. As I said, we give an orientation at the beginning. We talk about each topic. They have homework that they go through, and watch videos, read resources, do reflections, let us know what their needs are for each area. And then at the end, they give a presentation on their project plan and get a chance to have a Q&A and really dig into what they need going forward in implementing their project. So the requirements for a scale-up project are really benchmarking, reducing or improving by 20% or more, and considering equity and environmental justice. So that can look like, a project can kind of be anything in any area. They can focus in on water, for instance, or just focus in on like one area of sustainability, or they can kind of do it all. But as long as they have a tracking mechanism and are able to show their progress, and then also be able to show that 20% either reduction in impact or improving efficiency or who they're connecting with by 20% or more, and then also just making sure that they're thinking about equity and environmental justice, and that language is in the project and the policy that they are enacting. Those are kind of the 3 pillars of a scale-up project. And this is just something from our website, just talking about all of the different aspects of scale up and the benefits of being a part of it. So learning, making connections and collaborating with your cohort, making a plan. We also work with local banks. So CIC Tucson, the Community Investment Corporation, and Growth Partners Arizona, and they offer a specific loan program just for Scale Up participants called the Green Revolving Loan Fund. So, if a business wants to make a change, it has really low interest, and it's very accessible for folks, especially folks who might not be able to get a loan otherwise. They can show their project plan as their loan application and be able to access financing and we also connect them to other opportunities as they come up. And then they're able to implement their projects over a year of support from us, and we promote them and recognize them for their leadership. And of course, all of this is part of rebuilding our economy, becoming more resilient, focusing on equity and sustainability as very important pieces of that. So just a reminder, Sustainable Tucson went through the very first cohort of Scale Up back in 2020. And this was, some logos of the different folks in the cohort. This brought together folks from Phoenix and from Tucson. And that's really what we focused on. But in the past year, we have really opened it up to any business in the state, any locally owned and operated business in the state. So just in 2022, we've had 2 full cohorts, and we just started cohort 9 this week. So just some folks who have been a part of that. And just to show an example of someone in Tucson that we've worked with extensively, Harris Fletcher Enterprises has been an amazing collaborator, and they serve 150 people annually in Amphi, actually live very close to where they are here in Tucson. And they specifically serve veterans and refugees, and they provide affordable housing for folks, and as well as job and skills training. And they have really planned out an urban food forest and are in the process of implementing that. So you can see the bottom right. We attended this volunteering day for them of planting trees, and then we also learned about solar cooking and solar ovens and other solar applications, which is really awesome. And yeah, you can also see that through Scale Up, they were able to make some changes to their fixtures and to their appliances, to their insulation. So they have already been able to reduce their energy costs and their water usage down to almost half for water, or more than half for water, and then by about a third for energy. And they have goals to continue that this year and into next year as well. So finally, just a couple of other things that we've been working on lately in Tucson include helping with outreach for the climate action and adaptation planning process that is going on right now for Tucson, the city of Tucson. And we were able to engage a facilitator. So Anna Darian has really helped us with these community dialogues. She's very embedded in the community and has taken on the role of promotory and been able to help us do outreach and bring business owners together to get their input on what local businesses need in terms of what the city can do for climate action. We have already done one community dialogue and plan to do another, as well as some other pop-up events to get input, especially from Black, Indigenous, people of color owned businesses. And what we really want to see through this process is the inclusion of local resources and businesses, and thinking of them first when investments are being made for climate in the city. And then finally, a call for volunteers. So we have a great network of Green Team volunteers who in the past, before COVID, came to events and helped divert waste and do waste measuring, all with the goal of being towards zero waste for all of our events. So we're kicking, back into events and big events this year. So there are a couple of opportunities coming up. Please, reach out to us if you know anybody or if you would like to volunteer. Those are in Phoenix, but there might be other opportunities as well in the future. And then we also have a food waste working group that meets every other week. And that's a group that meets via Zoom. And so it's a fun place to kind of plan and think about how we can help local businesses reduce food waste and food packaging waste. So if you're interested, please reach out to us. Yeah, so I think, yes, that is it. Kind of a very quick overview of what we're doing. So yeah, any questions or anything, please reach out to us.
Well, I'm going to quote Anne, who says, "You got my brain popping." And Kevin may want to comment because one of the members who couldn't come today is on the Zero Waste Committee and actually has recommended to the city devoting some of the climate action plan to food waste and food loss reduction. So Kevin, did you want to ask Kelly anything about that?
Well, I'll just make a pitch, since you're assisting the city in doing outreach to the business community and the climate action plan, that you talk to the existing recycling, composting, reuse, repair businesses in the city. And because I think what we've determined is that one of the quickest and best ways to reduce climate emissions is to promote reuse, recycling, and composting strategies. And as you may know, the city wants to convert the Los Reales landfill into a sustainability campus. But I think it's something you need to be involved in, because they're looking at siting of a bunch of facilities down at the campus. And I'm not sure if that's the best approach or not. I think we need to inventory the existing recycling and composting infrastructure and see if there's some opportunities to help those businesses grow their operations, rather than, the city just issued an RFI to invite vendors that have alternative uses of material to propose a project for the sustainability campus. Well, you know where that facility is located. That's quite a ways from the rest of the community. And so I think it would be good for you to monitor what's going on there and maybe knock on the door, because I don't think that planning process is very transparent and open at this, unlike the climate plan, which I think they're doing a better job. But use the climate plan and reach out to those businesses, especially in the recycling and reuse sectors, that might be able to help out.
Yeah, and we definitely need their input for sure. So thank you for that.
We've got about 7 minutes for more questions, and we will continue after the break also.
Kelly, I had a question on food waste. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So if you're gardening, you probably have extra. And other than Nishkasita Refugee Network, do you know much about other gleaning that's going on to prevent food waste? Because we just had a meeting in my area, which is south of Tucson, but trying to get back on board with, composting is one thing, but getting it to people in need it's a difficult. So what do you think about gleaning, Kelly?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. I feel like my mind jumps to Ishkashita as well. I also think about Food Not Bombs, but I think that they really look for donations of food that's maybe like vegetables they would take, they hand out food to folks, I think every weekend. Yeah, possibly the food bank or yeah, I think there are definitely opportunities, but yeah, there need to be more as well.
Sometimes when the garden comes in, it gets carried away.
Oh, yeah, another thing could be even community gardens of Tucson. They produce, yeah, they produce food, of course, but might be connected to folks who need food as well because of that.
Right. I was at one of our community gardens this morning, and I talked to the manager about it, and they encourage gardeners with too much just to take it on over to the local Salvation Army or food bank, but who knows, we need to be incentivized to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Richard mentioned ICS in Tucson. Richard, what's ICS?
I forget.
Oh.
But I was hooked up with them for a little while, but now I can't remember what they stand for. But I know they have a giant food bank and distribution service along with a bunch of other things that do.
Interfaith Community Service.
Interfaith. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Kelly, it sounds like we're giving you lots of jobs. Is there someone, is this in your purview, or is this something that needs to get organized outside of LFA, but needs to get done?
I think it both. I think that, as we make more connections in the community with local businesses too, and opportunities come up, maybe there's a business or a nonprofit who's looking for food donations or something, we can connect that way. So yeah, I think just making sure that we are able to always connect back to local initiatives and local businesses is pretty much my purview. So yeah.
Jason, did you want to comment?
No, I think part of this is thinking about developing a broader ecosystem in Tucson, of which I think Local First could be a component of that, especially connecting restaurants who may have excess produce, whatever it may be. But yeah, no, I think that would be conversation Local First could be a part of for sure moving forward. I don't know that it would be the main driver of it necessarily, but I think that's definitely stuff we care about.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, we do have the food waste working group. So yeah, I'd be happy to give those details out to anybody who's interested in joining those meetings. Like I said, they're every other week on Wednesdays.
How about Laura? You had a comment.
Or I think Paula has had her hand up for a while too.
Thanks. I've got a question for Jason. I was struck by the fact that the example you gave, Company, is an online retailer based here and doing all of those things at their base here in Tucson. But I was wondering if your certification or your dealings with online retailers takes into account things like probably excess packaging and things like delivery costs for transportation for getting things to people.
Yeah, and I'll take a quick stab at it. And Kelly, if you jump in, because I think you know the business better. I mean, in short, yes, it takes into consideration all of those different aspects. And I think this company in particular has decided to purchase carbon offsets to help offset the emissions generated through the transportation of the goods. And in addition to that, yes, packaging waste, reducing that is all part of the green business certification. And, you know, I think one step is identifying what are those issues. And so many businesses may look at the green business certification as a starting point, but then in doing that, they may in doing their own audit of their business, realize that there are these different areas, be it packaging, food waste, whatever it may be, and they may be interested in looking at building a long-term project around that to deal with that aspect of their business practice. And that's when what Kelly talked about, scale up, is going to be very helpful, because it then helps them design, implement, and finance. And again, remember, I mean, talking about equity, access to smaller loan amounts, low interest rates, finance those projects in a way that'll realize savings immediately. So we see these things as very interconnected. Sorry, Kelly.
Yeah, no worries. Just more about that specific business is, so they've come up with a sustainability rating for each product that they offer on the website. So it's, I would say that they rate everyone that they work with and include that packaging piece. So that's it's a unique business. It's not something where they're actually packaging everything, but they do give a rating and let the consumer know that this business, you know, uses no plastic, or this business uses only recycled materials or compostable materials in packaging. And he includes that in all of his works, which is really awesome. Yeah.
That's good to know, like, given how much superfluous online shopping there has been, particularly in the last couple of years. They could serve almost as a model for the kinds of things that other companies should be doing. Good, thank you.
Definitely.
Hey, well, we've got more time at 11 o'clock or 11:01. You've really had us on the edge of our seats, and we look forward to continuing the conversation in 5 minutes. Meanwhile, get some fresh air, tea, or whatever pleases your body and mind.
Perfect. We'll see you in 5.
Thank you.
I'm curious as to whether it's possible for LFA to be promoting Arizona manufacturing. Because right now, I like to tell people that nothing we make can be made without fossil fuels, and almost nothing can be made near here, loosely defined. So everything requires a global supply chain. One option that I think we have is to make a directory of local, regionally built products. Does LFA have something like that, or have you considered it?
Yeah, so Local First does pay attention to that, in particular looking at businesses. They have a project which helps businesses, corporations, etc., to source, if they so choose, to source their products locally. And, you know, best case scenario, in thinking about the environmental impact, the more we can produce in and around us, the less you see in carbon emissions and transportation, etc. You know, I don't think, unfortunately, there's a silver bullet because, you know, like you said, I think we're always tapped into the global supply chain, but the more you can produce locally, the better. But LFA does work with corporations, et cetera, to try and source as much as they can locally and connect businesses with suppliers who can provide quality services at competitive prices without having to ship them in from California, Texas, the Midwest, whatever it may be.
Oregon used to have a statewide directory of Oregon produced products. Any motion in that sort of direction here?
Well, yeah, Local First does have the LFA marketplace, which is, if you go to our website, localfirstarizona.com, you'll see one of the tabs is, I believe, buying locally. And you'll be able to see this is for members of Local First. For example, my favorite coffee shop up here in Phoenix, which is where I live, AT Oasis, is able to sell their coffee through the Local First marketplace at no cost to them. And it's a way to connect local retailers to consumers throughout Arizona who want to support local. So it's not quite as comprehensive as what you're talking about, sir, but I think it's kind of a step in the right direction.
It's all good, but I'm concerned that we actually need to connect the actual manufacturers as opposed to the retail.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I think we've got kind of a patchwork in terms of dealing with those things. I don't think it's comprehensive yet, but that is something that we are always thinking about, is how to create that type of information for consumers and suppliers together to source locally.
Go ahead, Kelly, and then I want to connect with Kevin on this.
Oh yeah, it was real quick. And what Jason said, I think it's very based on what the business wants to do and if they're interested in sourcing locally and looking at local manufacturers and suppliers and that kind of thing. But we do mention that and like talk about it in Scale Up. And it's a few of the measures in the checklist for the certification, as well as sourcing locally, and offer resources for that. So yeah, something that we're definitely working on and trying to connect with folks on for sure.
Now, Kelly, Kevin was asking about supporting the local businesses who are doing recycling and composting and reuse and all that kind of thing already, and getting the city connected to them when they're thinking about the zero waste plan. Now, possibly a corollary to that, Steve Kozachik, our Ward 6 councilman, has been working on, he and Paul Cunningham, I think, have been the champions of this glass recycling, because the city decided it's too expensive. You lose money by recycling glass in the way they were doing it. So Kozachik and Cunningham said, wait, there's got to be a use for this stuff. And so they've been collecting stuff at kind of near Reed Park, and then also at Ward 6 office, maybe some other places. But they're having a hard time getting someone who can locally work with that glass to repurpose it. So are you at all informed on that? Have any ideas how that could move forward?
Yeah, I think it's awesome to hear that is being thought about by the city council. I think for that amount of glass, like for the entire city's recycling system, I think, the opportunities for using it in infrastructure projects and that kind of thing are the most promising and would be really great to see in the climate action plan. But yeah, I don't know about, you know, a local person who works with glass. Besides Sonoran Glass School, you know, they take, you know, they take some glass and put it, create it, sorry. The glass that they use, they donate to another business who uses it as aggregate in making like cement products, but that is pretty small scale. So that was just an example that I thought of. But bigger scale, yeah, I think finding or funding a new manufacturer or a new processing center or something like that would be really, really great to see. Yeah.
Thank you. Anne, please.
Yes. How local are Ace Hardware stores? I get it that Home Depot is not, not a place to go, but the only other alternative is Ace Hardware stores. So how are they local franchises, or how does that work?
So I think we don't really work with them because they are locally managed, but still owned as a chain, or like headquartered also outside of Ace as a brand, is headquartered outside of Arizona.
Are there some good local hardware stores? I don't know of any.
True. I'm not a hardware person, so I don't know about Tucson. You know, we do have a green business directory, but that's not a guarantee of, you know, everybody who might be locally owned in Tucson. So I don't know. Yeah.
Kelly, there is things like Gerson Building Supplies, more like salvage stores where they reuse products. And boy, wouldn't there be a great need for more salvage businesses that would
just a place you could go buy nails, you know, local, just a local, maybe they don't make the nails, and that's not what I'm asking for, but that they run their own business. They used to have little hardware stores in your neighborhood and stuff like that.
But I mean, on that point, Anne, I do think Ace Hardware stores are better than buying from Home Depot.
Yeah, that I've even
For
figured
sure.
that out by myself, and they, you know, they're closer and they're really nice and friendly. But I also, you know, not being a do-it-yourselfer, I found when I moved here and I became the designated shopper for my builders, I found people at Home Depot really helpful, and I learned so much about that. But now I'm ready, you know, I go to Ace now, but I was wondering if there was something even more.
I would actually.
You know, Laura's been waiting. Let's let Laura.
Okay.
Oh, just a minor comment. I personally consider a place like Ace that's locally owned, but part of a chain, to be an intermediate step.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can't always have everything you want. It's
No.
the nature of being a grown-up and the nature of life. And so that's a middle ground that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, what Kimber was talking about is shifting the spending that you can, you know, locally, or that is doable for you. And that looks different for, you know, whatever we're talking about, for sure.
Yeah, and there are local specialty stores that offer some of the things that you might buy at either an Ace or Home Depot or a Lowe's. There's specialty door stores that are locally owned and independent, specialty window stores, specialty hardware stores, specialty makers of security screens, locally owned businesses that sell cleaning products. You know, there's a lot of things you buy in those big stores that you can get from a local store. It's just not going to be a store that has however many tens of thousands of square feet and millions of products.
And could I ask one more question about local banks? Is there like Hughes? I have one account at Hughes, but I also have an account at Bank of America that I used when I was working and getting money transfers through SWIFT from all over the world, and they didn't like doing it with Hughes. So is Hughes considered a really good, if I moved, took everything out of Bank of America and joined it to Hughes, would you think that was a good idea? Is there a better recommendation?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Hughes is like one of our official partners. It might be, it might not
What's
be.
An official? What's another official partner?
We work with Vantage West. I know for sure. I think Pima Federal Credit Union as well. But I'm not knocking Hughes. I think, you
No.
know, any local bank is going to be better than,
Okay.
you know, Bank of America.
The
Yeah.
Pima Federal, you think is good. And what else did you mention? Pima Federal and what?
Vantage West. Jason,
Vantage
could
West.
you? Are there any more? I know there are more, but.
Yeah, I
There's-
think Arizona Federal
yeah.
Credit Union. I don't know the Tucson landscape, but no, I mean what Kelly said is really what matters is the bank incorporated in Arizona?
And use is.
And if that is the case, then that is going to be a markedly better option
Okay.
in terms of keeping that money recirculating in the Arizona economy.
Okay.
And just to reiterate, there's an excellent section on the Local First Arizona website that y'all sort of breezed over before. But Anne, that's there's a bunch of good resources there.
Yeah, if you go to our website or just look up Arizona Move Your Money. It's called Move Your Money, and it gives you a list of locally owned banks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Super. Trace got overridden. Thank you for waiting, Trace, and then Bridget after.
Just a quick comment. I'm sure this was considered when LFA was first starting up, but I'd advise reconsidering the question of an affiliate member, because Ace Hardware, they're locally owned franchises. So it's a national franchise, but it's locally owned. And the reason that that's important is that the local owners make the buying decisions, as opposed to a Home Depot and Lowe's, where the managers just manage what they're told to. So there's no local purchase for anything except some landscaping stuff. I think if we want to tackle this problem of not having anybody who has the authority to buy local, which in my mind is the key first step to creating local markets, then we're going to have to loosen up so we can have people who actually can buy stuff. So my comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Trace. Bridget.
Yeah, just a quick question. So I guess I have two, but one is scale up something that you have to pay for in order to be a part of, or is it through like the state or any funding? And then two, what are resources for like people that want to start a sustainable business?
So for your first question, yes, Scale Up does have a fee, and it depends on the size of the business. So the kind of entry level is 1 to 10 employees, and that is $199 for the cohort and for the full year of support. But it goes up from there based on size. And I will say that we do offer partial to full scholarships based on need, and also, of course, giving preference to Black, Indigenous, people of color owned businesses, queer owned businesses, women owned businesses, nonprofits. And it's just something that we offer to be as accessible as possible, because our main goal is really building that resiliency, being accessible, being equitable, and increasing our impact, of course. And then in terms of other resources for starting a sustainable business, I mean, our programs, just to plug us some more, but we work with startups, we work with folks who are collaborating on projects who aren't necessarily like an official business themselves, like for instance, working with a church, or Sustainable Tucson worked with a church on their project. So it can kind of be at any level. We would love to help with yeah, just starting out and making the foundations for a sustainable business. Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, just real quick, just to add to that, some specifics through the Green Revolving Loan Fund, businesses are eligible for up to $100,000 in low interest finance, which they don't need to be, as Kelly said, that can be in the startup phase. In addition to that, Local First, through the other arms of the organization, which we referenced briefly, provides a lot of technical assistance, thinking about budgeting, putting together a business plan, thinking about financing, etc. So the sustainability team exists in this broader network of other arms of the organization to really help guide businesses from inception to thriving and being able to, compete and do good business here in Arizona. So
Thank you. And we're closing in on the end. Kevin.
Yeah, just a thought, because we've been talking a lot about trying to promote shopping locally as much as possible, and I'm wondering, part of that question is creating a constituency of people who are aware of that issue, who will, the folks who are the consumers, basically. How do you think about that issue? About how can you encourage more consumers, more residents in the community and others to think about? I mean, I know you promote that with the businesses that are in your various programs, but I was thinking that maybe a pledge program or something where people could sign up and say, this year I commit to buying more of my stuff locally, a certain percentage or something, pledge program, but that takes somebody to manage a pledge program. It's a pretty big deal. But I guess what I'm trying to do is create the demand and working on that part of the equation, or collaborating with some groups to work on that part of the equation, with other groups that have similar interests, but also have ties into the community. Could be neighborhood associations or business districts or what have you. So I think I'm trying to figure out, how do you create that demand for those products, and how do you make people aware of the issue?
And I know we have to transfer it over to Marta because we're coming up on the end of ours. But if you look at Local First website, there's a bunch of different opportunities to create demand and build that consumer demand for products here locally.
So many pieces to work with, and I'm sure you could be feeling like the volunteer crew that was out there in front of the school clearing out some weeds and putting a few fruit trees, and then the neighbor comes over and says, hey, you see this tree over here that really needs some work? And we say, well, wait, we've already got our job right here. So lots of partnerships to build and lots of collaboration will be the answer to most of these questions. We are really grateful and thrilled by the work that you're doing. Please thank Kimber for us. And if you care to stick around for a minute and hear what Marta and Laura are going to present, please feel free, but we won't feel bad if you need to go to your next activity for this Saturday.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you all so much. I do have to go, but I really, really appreciate all your questions and your time and listening to us and making connections. That's what we're all about. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity and hope to continue this partnership and build the relationship into the future.
We definitely would like to do that. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Kelly. And thanks to Kimber as well. And Christy reminds us of some local resources answered one of those last questions: Habit Store and Originate Natural Building Materials. Good to remember that there are these smaller specialty stores that can do so much to serve this community. We're going to shift now to our last presentation by ambassadors to the group. And like we did last week, I'd like to ask those who are listening to choose one of the 8 steps to listen for, and then just to identify that one. And so I'm going to ask, Laura's laughing because she got all 8 steps in the first one, I think.
No, because I forgot to go over the presentation and check for that.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll get some self-awareness.
So could we enable screen sharing?
We will do that. First, let me just, or while I'm doing that, is this for you, Marta, or for Laura?
I'm going to do it, and then Laura's going to say next slide.
Okay, easily done. So
Perfect.
1 second. Okay, you are now a co-host, so you can share. So Bridget, which of the 8 steps, just which one would you like to listen for today?
I can do the overview.
Okay, so
That
just,
works.
wow, okay, it's going to be beautiful to look at. And then Richard, which one would you like to listen for?
I have no memory at all of the 8 steps, so just pick one for me and I'll pick that one.
Okay, the attention step. How do they get our attention at the beginning? And Anne? Oops, can't hear you.
How about I can do needs again?
Okay, super. And Christine?
Give me a choice or two. I'm flipping through my notes.
I'm sorry, Christy, I made a bang I couldn't hear.
I was gonna do the tie-up closing or something else, Stuart.
That's great. Yeah, how do they close?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So watching the clock, we look forward to this very much, and we're ready.
Okay, everybody, and thank you and welcome. Laura and I are excited. Throughout the course of this class session, we've heard Trace mentioned several times, and it really struck both Laura and I, that more rain falls on the city of Tucson each year than the entire population consumes. And with that statistic in mind, it really begs the question, why couldn't we here in Tucson live off of harvested rainwater and gray water, but harvested water overall? And so today, Laura and I are going to be talking about these practices in a presentation we've entitled Cultivating Abundance, focusing on these 2 aspects of water collection and reuse. Okay.
Water everywhere. Earth, of course, is known as the water planet. The most striking feature of our planet viewed from space is the water. 75% of our surface is covered with either liquid or frozen water. Besides being on the surface of the earth, there's water in the clouds, there's water deep in the crust of the earth. Of course, our bodies are mostly water, both inside and between our cells. But a lot of that water is salt water, not nearly as useful to us as fresh water, of course. And most fresh water even is unavailable to us. Only about 0.5% of all the water on Earth is fresh water that we can access, that isn't too deep in the ground, for example. Next slide, please. On top of the fact that fresh water is limited, we're in a long-term drought. And we, of course, is Southwestern North America and Arizona. By the way, if you want to locate Tucson on here, you know, the 2 legs of our southern border, Tucson is directly north of the kink in the border where those 2 legs join. And we're about the same distance north as half the length of that right-hand leg or eastern leg. So, next slide, please. So this long-term,
sorry, here we go.
I'm sorry, what have I done? Yeah, okay. So this extreme drought, of course, it's been in the news a lot lately, has been dramatically influencing Lake Powell and Lake Mead, our two largest reservoirs in the United States, two reservoirs along the Colorado River, where millions of people in Western North America, including us, get our water. One of the reasons, by the way, I just found this out reading a couple days ago, that the change in the water levels at these two lakes has been so dramatic is they're canyon lakes. And so if you picture the sides of the canyon as being sort of like a martini glass, each progressive loss of water, say 10 feet or 1/10 of an inch or whatever, is proportionately, how to say that? The impact on what's left is proportionately greater because the contours have changed. Moving on. By the way, yes, we have had some good rains, but when like Lake Mead is 170 feet low, if the water level goes up 18 or 24 inches, it's really not a big deal. So Tucson gets our Colorado River water through Central Arizona Project, a 330-mile boondoggle of a canal that loses massive amounts of water to seepage and evaporation. Historically, as Tucson was growing, you can see that first darker bright blue color we relied on groundwater. That was not a good idea for many reasons. And then we started using surface water, that brighter blue color. In the last 20 years, that's been our main water source, even though we have gotten smarter at integrating more other types of sources. Next, please. So the challenges are facing us are immense.
Oh, okay, I'll take it over.
I'm trying to remember if this is where we're supposed to switch.
Yeah, beyond this historic drought, Tucson is the third fastest warming city in the US. Without action, by 2100, Tucson's average annual temperature is likely to be 10% warmer. And in June, 10 degrees warmer. And in June, of course, that's going to be not pretty. And so really our health and well-being are at stake, our long-term survival as a community in this geographic area. And yeah, as individuals and together. So what's a sustainability buff to do now that we've discussed this landscape? Well, we believe that harvesting water and planting native trees and edible landscapes will help us address these challenges and provide many other benefits as well. So what is water harvesting? It's the process of intercepting water that would otherwise be lost on a property, let's say, and directing it and putting it to beneficial use. And we have several different types of water harvesting. The first is rainwater harvesting, which of course is collecting water from our monsoons, our winter rains. We also have gray water harvesting, which is basically collecting lightly used water from basically like sinks or washing machines or showers or drinking fountains, if we're talking about a commercial building, and then directing it into the landscape. And then the final type, which we won't be discussing today, is called condensate harvesting. And it basically operates on that principle of if there's hot air and it hits a cold surface, essentially the molecules will start beating up, right? They'll become more solid and you'll start seeing all this water kind of dripping off like on a cold glass of water with ice outside on the patio, or on you'll see this through on air conditioning systems. So that's another possibility for water harvesting, but we will not talk about it too much today. So what are the benefits of harvesting this water, putting it to use? Well, of course, one of the biggest ones is we're saving potable water that we can drink for drinking and not utilizing it to, not letting it literally go down the drain. We can help conserve and replenish groundwater. We can grow beautiful edible landscapes. We can create cooling and shade for homes by watering a little urban, forest that really feels cool and delicious on a hot day. We can create shade also for biking and walking, generate food sources for wildlife. And of course, we can also lower our water and energy bills by implementing these types of harvesting practices. But there are some caveats. When we're thinking about water harvesting practices, generally they require intervention on land, right? And even sometimes in buildings for piping, et cetera. So you probably, to implement this, it makes the most sense. You need garden space, right? Likely your own home, because you're investing time, energy, labor, cost. And, that doesn't mean though, that if you're a renter, you can't, maybe do some interventions for water harvesting, or that you can't lobby the management or get together with your community to try to implement these changes in maybe more public or common spaces. But yes, a homeowner is most likely. It requires time, planning, some learning, and money. So, that is the case. However, there's tons of resources available all over the internet, here at local community, nonprofits with workshops. And another benefit is that there are rebates available, and Tucson Water offers rebates for gray water systems up to $1,000 per household, as well as rainwater harvesting rebate programs up to $2,000 per household. So that can help offset that initial investment. So now I'm handing it over to Laura, who's going to take us through the first section, rainwater harvesting.
All right, so diving into rainwater harvesting, there's two major types of rainwater harvesting. Passive rainwater harvesting relies on shaping the land. Yes, human action is involved in setting up the system and establishing it, and occasional maintenance may be needed. But in general, a passive rainwater harvesting system takes care of itself. Your intent is to create areas that slow the flow and then capture it so the water can be absorbed into the land. Passive systems don't usually incorporate mechanical means or storage devices other than the soil as a storage. Active rainwater harvesting, the most visible feature of active rainwater harvesting is usually a tank or cistern of some type. There may be a variety of pipes, valves, and so on. And human action is required on an ongoing basis to use that system, to switch the valve, to move the hose to a different plant, even to set a timer to trigger a pump to put the water through an irrigation system. So active systems also often involve a larger upfront investment, but they also grant you more versatility and potential, because if you're storing the water in a tank, you can use it at wholly different seasons than when that precipitation fell. Or you can use it in a different place. If you've got the right hose or distribution system, you can use it farther from where you captured it. For example, if you captured it off your roof. Next slide, please. So these are examples of passive systems. Water flows off the roof to a channel or a basin, or water flows off the roof to a gutter and downspouts, and from there to a channel or basins, or water flowing off of concrete. By the way, you don't have to have a hard surface to have a passive water catchment system. You can, if you have a sloped yard, capture water from one part of the yard where it tends to flow and build earthworks and put a tree to capture that water where it's more useful. Next slide, please. This is an overhead view or a site plan looking down at the box is a house or the roof of a house. And it has examples of water harvesting around the home, such as we saw in the other perspective illustrations on the previous slide. So this particular property, they are having a holding area directly off the roof on one side of the house. the other side of the house, there's not a place for planting, or the lay of the land doesn't call for more planting or basins there. So they're channeling that water to a low point at the end of the house where they might have trees, creating shade, say, from the western side. And then they're also catching water off a sidewalk out front. Next slide, please. So examples of active water harvesting with tanks. By the way, this tank placement is not optimal. Generally, it's considered now, if you have a really large tank, it's considered smart to put it a little farther from your house, just in case there was a malfunction. You aren't like flushing away your foundation of your home. Lines of rain barrels used to be more common in Tucson as more larger tank sources have become available. But anything works. If you just want to collect rainwater to feed your houseplants, you can buy a big trash can from your locally owned Ace Hardware store and set it up to have water for your houseplants. There are underground storage tanks possible. Those are not nearly as common here. A few years ago, I met a gentleman who moved to Tucson from one of the Caribbean islands. And he said every home there has a water storage tank where they store the water they capture off the roof. And he was quite surprised to move to Tucson as a young man and realize that was rare here. Next slide, please. So the basic components of water harvesting are pretty straightforward. No big surprises here. There's 4 of them. One is a source of water. One is a place to use that water, often a basin. You'll have plants in the basin. You don't want to just plant the water in the ground. You want to use it to nurture something, perhaps something you'll benefit from. And you want to have mulch. I'm also going to comment here before we talk more about any of these. Often passive and active systems are integrated, and you have a hybrid system or a combination on a given property. For example, I have water harvesting basins on my property, and I have cisterns. And sometimes at certain seasons, I run the garden hose from a cistern to one of the basins where there's plants I want to nurture. So next slide, please. Again, mulch is an important one of those 4 components. Some sources say that a 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch can reduce evaporation from the soil by as much as 25%. So not only does mulch help water infiltrate the soil, it helps it reduce the loss. It also tempers soil temperature extremes, both in winter and in summer. It adds beneficial nutrients to the soil, which of course keeps plants healthier. And it does need, organic mulch is considered better than inorganic mulch like rock or gravel. But, and it does need to be replaced periodically, but organic mulch is generally the way to go, with the exception of an area where you have water flowing through that would carry off organic mulch. Next, please. So an overview of some principles and recommendations. Study your site. Go outside while it's raining and watch where the water flows before you start working. Consider starting small with just a passive system. You can pick one corner of your yard and enhance the slope and use a little bit of soil that you move to create a berm across from there. And voila, you have your own little passive water harvesting system, even if it's only taking care of one tree. So be willing to experiment, start small. Remember, your goal is to slow the flow and increase infiltration. Think about putting your earthworks or the plants that are going to benefit from the you've harvested to support more than one function. So can you get shade from that plant? Also, can you stack beneficial functions? So can that shade tree also provide food? Or can a berm provide a place to walk between a series of garden beds? Keep your eye on those 4 basics again. Remember, things will grow and you'll need to assess and enhance your system as well as enjoy it. Okay.
Well, that now brings us to gray water basics. And I'm not a plumber, so I'm not going to go into piping too much. But I want to start here with thinking about average water use for a family in Tucson. So a family of 3 on average will use 120,000 gallons of water per year. And that all just goes right down the drain. And interestingly, looking at how they use it, when we look at this pie chart, which is provided by Brad Lancaster, we see surprisingly that a majority of this water is actually being used outdoors for landscape irrigation. So that's 45% that's going to watering trees, keeping, ornamentals alive, or maybe, to edible food. But this could easily be supplanted by looking at those areas in blue. So we have gray water from faucets, gray water from showers. You put that together, it's about 32%. And if you reoriented that towards the landscape and you used harvested rainwater to make up the difference, essentially you would eliminate that 45% all completely, and you'd be allowing the water that you are using in your home to have multiple uses and nurture, a wonderful landscape. So what is gray water? Lightly used drain water from sinks, showers, bathtubs, drinking fountains, and washing machines. And with gray water harvesting, this wastewater can actually become a resource for our households. If gray water is directed to the top 1 to 2 feet of garden soil to nourish beautiful and productive landscapes, and it also provides energy and chemical-free wastewater treatment. And again, wastewater here is within quotations because it's lightly used and is being reused. So as you think about moving down this road of gray water harvesting, it's really important for you to know the types of water, right, that is produced by an average household and how they're designated. So essentially what we can see is that we have clear water, also known as white water, on the left, and that's the water that is nice, clear and clean, that comes out of your faucet and tap, or maybe out of your shower as you're warming up the water to jump in. And of course, that's perfectly fine to pour directly onto, the food that you're growing in your garden. Then we have gray water, which is kind of an intermediary category, and it's the water that comes from your baths and your bathroom sink and washing machines. And this has maybe some bacteria, maybe it has some products from soaps, etc. But it's clean enough to go into your landscape and water your plants. And then we have black water, which is the final category. And in this category, we have water that's draining from toilets, from dishwashers, from kitchen drains. But this designation of dishwashers, water from dishwashers, and water from kitchen drains being grouped together with toilets is obviously pretty black and white. We talked about there being many shades of gray. And when we look at water from dishwashers and kitchens, it has more organic matter, right? It might have, bits of food, etc., but it's in a different category from toilet water. So this can easily be used in your landscape, but maybe directed towards a compost pile so that can start disintegrating into the soil. And if you have obviously, like if you have a vegetarian diet, low on meat, low on grease, that's going to really make your water from your kitchen sink, let's say, pretty adept, right? Pretty good for your landscape in comparison to other types of diets. So how do you implement these gray water systems? In my opinion, it's important to start with ease, because I think there's very expensive, complex systems and investments, but there's also really simple things that you could start and do in your home. And kind of low-hanging fruit, which would provide a lot of enjoyment and refreshment, is an outdoor shower, right? Start there. And that's basically something that can be easily set up. Moving forward, in kind of levels of difficulty, we have laundry to landscape systems, which take gray water from your washing machine and direct it out, whether it's inside the home or outside the home. Outside the home is a little bit easier, inside the home, just a little bit harder. Then we have fixture specific solutions. So, Laura was saying, well, yeah, if you assess, what sink gets the most use in my home, and is that sink against an exterior wall? Well, if that's the case, it might not be too hard to really just drill a hole through the wall, organize the piping to come out, and then maybe nourish a bush or a tree that's not too far. And then the next level of difficulty is a full home system. And if you are building, then that's easy enough to install because you can plan it from the get-go. If you're retrofitting, it becomes more labor intensive, more cost intensive. And at that point, you might as well go for a fixture specific solution. So let's start with outdoor showers, because I think they're so fun, and yeah, why not? So this is Brad Lancaster's outdoor shower. He used reclaimed materials to create a nice little privacy screen for anyone who uses it. And when you do this, obviously you're always following that notion of elevation, right, and pitch. So you find something, a location with high elevation, or you kind of raise it. And then you can use outdoor plumbing or put it against a wall if that's the case, or a solar shower kit if you want to keep it nice and simple. And you can direct water to the plantings in your garden, either via earthworks, as Laura kind of has discussed and mentioned to us, or piping. So the next level of difficulty, I would say, is the laundry, the washing machine. And the easiest way to hook up a washing machine to a gray water system is if your washing machine is outdoors, maybe under a patio or in a shed. And I think a lot of people in Tucson still do have that setup. And what you can do, the easiest, is a multi-drain pipe system. This again is from Brad Lancaster. We're going to see a lot of shots from his home. And what you see here is basically that we have the hose from the washing machine that can basically be connected to different drain pipes and rotated with each wash. And each drain pipe goes to a different tree in the garden, so none of them get overwatered. And that includes olive, pomegranate, orange, fig, and white zapote. You'll also notice that there is a sewer drain option, and that is important to include and keep it capped when not in use. And we'll talk more about why that pretty much is a best practice. If you're indoors, then you're actually going to be needing to drill a hole and get the piping through the wall. But here there's a lot of plumbing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I just want to focus on kind of some of the key components. If you're installing a system inside your home, you're really going to focus in. The key element of the system is the diverter valve, because what it's doing is allowing the water, well, to come in, and then it has like a lever or some sort of mechanism that lets you decide, well, does this water from this wash go to the sewer, or does this water from this wash go to the gray water system in my yard? And you need to have that flexibility depending on what you're washing. And here's just an example of that, going out into the yard and irrigating through a 1-inch tube, more or less, to multiple plants and shrubs and basins, because obviously a lot of water is discharged right through one load. So it needs to be distributed well throughout your yard. So this is a close-up view of what that kind of valve looks like, right? If you're using that in your home. And as I said, this can be used in other applications too, like, you know, a basin in the bathroom to wash your hands. The important thing is to have this mechanism handy so somebody can quickly adjust where the water is flowing based on their needs and what they're washing and what they're doing. So it's really important to be aware of what you're sending to your garden, right? Because that's going into your soil, it's feeding your plants. So you don't want to send gray water to the garden if it contains any bleach, if it contains soaps with salt. Many do. So you've got to look for sodium on the label and make sure you're not using something with it, because we have plenty of salt in our earth already. And that's not something we want to add to. And also bodily fluid. So let's say you're washing your baby's diapers. That's a situation where you actually don't want to send it to your yard. You want to send it to the sewer because it's too high in organic content and not a good scene. So that sewer option is critical, for certain instances where it's just not appropriate to have it be, in your yard. And these are some of the ingredients and products that you need to avoid if you're going to be, putting water into your garden. Anything with chlorine or bleach, peroxygen, whitening, right, for your clothes or maybe even cleaning products. And this whole list, boron, borax. But there are certain recommended products that are used for dish and laundry soap that are gray water safe. And these brands are Oasis and Biopac. I've heard those mentioned as gray water safe products to use. And some considerations for outdoor gray water use is that, of course, it's best suited for bushes and trees because we really want it to go to the roots. And not to the edible parts of plants. This is not drinkable water. It's gonna, has some bacterial content. So really we wanted to direct it to the earth, to the roots, so that it'll naturally be processed by organisms. We don't want direct animal or human contact with the water. Of course, use your minimum 2% downward slope to direct that water to multiple mulched and vegetated infiltration basins. That mulch will also help with any decomposition and processing and ensure gray water doesn't pool. So you don't want it stinky, you don't want those mosquitoes, you don't want it to run off your property because then your neighbor might start complaining and the city might too, because essentially it is wastewater. Okay, and to avoid pooling, it's often recommended to do an infiltration test where you want to divert your water and kind of build your basin. Because like I said, if you're doing a washing machine load and you're sending that out to the garden, that's a lot of water. So this test is recommended where you dig a hole, you soak it, you measure, you pour, get water in it, and then you measure how quickly it is absorbed by the earth in that area, so that you can use this data to calculate how big your basin needs to be, what that surface area is to be able to effectively absorb that water at peak, daily flow, so you don't create a hazard in your garden. And by doing this, you can really, grow a lot of, shade canopy and urban food forests. Here we have from Brad Lancaster again, basically two illustrations of a water conserving household, non-conserving household. But if we see even the non-conserving household, they're able to grow the apricot tree, the olive tree, citrus trees. So it's a wonderful way of really putting your water, giving it an extra life, a second life, extra use, and feeding your garden. But remember that water conservation is the goal. We still want to kind of be thoughtful about it. And everyone can conserve water at home, indoors and out, starting today by simply paying attention and more attention to everyday choices. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. We've kind of reviewed rainwater harvesting basics, gray water harvesting basics, and now I'm going to hand it over to Laura for next steps.
Well, just briefly, there are mass quantities of resources out there that you can access. Whatever way you like to learn, there are learning opportunities in Tucson related to rainwater and gray water harvesting. You want to go to a week-long in-person workshop, you want to watch some videos online, you want to pay somebody else to do it, whatever you want, it's available. I want to encourage you not to go too far down all the rabbit holes of resources, resource rabbit holes, because really some of these things are very straightforward. Infiltration test may sound like whoa, whoa, but really it's about digging a hole and filling it with water and seeing how fast the water soaks in.
Low tech.
Yeah, and same for things related to rainwater. So yeah, we hope some of you that don't already have systems are inspired to go for it.
Excellent. And I have a resource list. If you're interested, I can certainly send it out. That tells you where you can follow up to get more information. And ultimately, Laura and I really want to encourage you to start where you are and do what you can. You don't have to implement all of these systems, but every bit that you do does help. And I think also gives you a sense of satisfaction to see that you were able to implement something, that you're doing your part, and then to see the results in your own backyard. And I think that's it.
Thank you both. We are right up against noon, so why don't we just briefly hear from, let's see, Richard, you were going to catch their attention step. What did you hear?
Right. What struck me was the idea that we already get more water than everybody uses in Tucson, and how do we deal with that topic? Yeah. It was sort of an attention.
Yeah, highly effective attention step. And you were going to listen for the need. You have to unmute though.
Been blowing my nose, so I didn't want to disturb people. Starting from Richard's attention step, I think the main idea was, given that we can already get enough water through the rain, we need to look at passive and active ways to harvest the rain. And the need that I heard was both explicit and implicit. In order to do this, we have to sit down and make choices and think about letting go of this idea is, we turn on the tap and out comes the water. That it's time to think about that and let go of all sorts of things that we thought were important and begin making critical choices.
All right.
And that's all.
And it sounds as though the issue or the fact of all that rainwater, the attention step elicits the need, because we all know that we need more water.
Yeah.
With the Colorado becoming a lesser resource now in our menu. And then Bridget, you were going to capture the overview. Did we get an overview?
Yeah, I think I got their overview of at least talking about rainwater and gray water recycling. And specifically, I think with rainwater, like the different types of rainwater, passive, active, some of the principles and recommendations in there. And then for gray water, the types of gray water that there is, or the types of water that there is, implementation and considerations. And then it wrapped up with some resources.
You definitely caught the major sections. Bridget, did they give those to us at the beginning, or did they just unfold as they went along?
They unfolded as we went along.
Yes.
Okay. Just
well
checking.
done, Bridget. Thank you.
I got you.
It was organic.
You on
It
our
was
team.
organic. It's an organic presentation.
An organic overview.
Thank you, Richard.
And Christy, you were going to notice a closing.
Yes, and in closing, they highlighted water conservation period, and that should be a goal for everybody here now. I thought they did a fantastic job, you guys.
Right. Is there one thing besides what you mentioned, Christy, that you thought was fantastic?
Well, they each had it sort of a closing. So she had the principles and recommendation. And so, you know, so did Marta with her gray water. Just, you know, start where you can and go from there. So we know the goal.
Start where you are. I thought that was good. Start where you are and do what you can.
And go from there. Yes.
No, that was a great way to end.
Anything else that you noticed that you thought gave this presentation a certain sparkle or verve?
But the visual aid, some of the slides were really good. The charts and the diagrams, I like those. And, you know, using references to Brad Lancaster and people whose work we already know, at least we do. So that was good.
And Marta is generally very animated anyway, so it just fit right in.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had fun working together because we were able to help each other with kind of piecing it all and making it hang, which was good.
I have a comment on washing machine gray water, Marta. We lived in California, and I actually took my drain hose to a large bucket because I wanted to know how much water was I really using per load. Of course, in a high efficiency, but it's barely between 4 and 5 gallons for every load. So then, if you did wash once a day, it's quite a bit lower.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we're to conserve anyway. So it didn't look like Brad had a high efficiency washer, but maybe a top loading HE. So those numbers could actually be lower. And yes, in California, where you're really being pinched and can't water, then yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. Wow.
Paula or Trace had a comment, and then Laura.
Just briefly, it was a very good presentation on conventional water harvesting and gray water, but we're missing almost half the water supply we have because there's a lot more runoff than active water harvesting or passive harvesting can utilize. So we've got tens of billions of gallons that aren't going to be usable from either of those. And we need a third high volume water harvesting system, which the only one I know of is dry wells. And that could be 5 to 10 billion gallons of additional water every year.
That would be a great third part to our presentation.
Well, we had mentioned at one point the idea of, you know, where do we draw the line? Do we go into green stormwater infrastructure and so on? But I don't know what time we started, but we obviously had enough content.
Yes.
Oh, it was a good presentation.
What time did we start, Stuart? Did you notice?
Well, it's possible you didn't start till 11:25. So you refilled 35 minutes. So the question is, would you like to make a presentation like this to the Green Rotary Club?
Sure. I mean, I'd want to work on it a little more. I literally threw this together after work.
Yes, and get a full night's sleep the night before instead of tweaking the slides
Sure.
till 1 a.m. or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah.
And maybe incorporate Trace's suggestions and have Bridget write up our summary on the intro. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I hear enthusiasm.
Are you in the Green Rotary Club?
No, but we have friends who are.
Okay.
Yes, and they do like presentations. So that's usually the Rotary presentation is, I think, about 20 minutes, at least that's past experience. They want you to talk about 20 minutes, so there's time for question and answer. I don't think they've ever given more than half an hour total. But again, that could vary from club to club. But I see and hear your enthusiasm. There was certainly animation throughout. And I think that's part of what will get your audience in. is simply your animation.
It wasn't just me, it was Laura too. She came up
Yeah.
with, what's a sustainability buck to do?
Yeah.
And other key moments. Yeah.
I think I noticed myself repeating things a couple of times because I had not thought ahead about what phrasing would most clearly encapsulate and convey a particular idea. I sort of would repeat, the two sides of coin or say something again a second way. I think if it were more polished, it could easily be
Refined.
20
Yeah,
minutes instead of 30 minutes.
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, the first set of pancakes always has all the ingredients, all the nutrition. Just the second set comes out a little better. Yeah, the pictures are quite striking. Terms like cultivating abundance, water everywhere. What's the sustainability buff to do, as someone said. All of these are great attention getters and clear presentations. The lightning picture, what an interesting one to say. We have, what are the challenges? And it's light and striking, very enjoyable pictorial background. We could go on a lot. I'm going to ask you, all of you, to bear with me and do your feedback either now or by email, because we won't have time to reflect on the program as a whole. And I think that that's a good situation. That means that we're really not ready to end. So let's keep in touch. You'll be hearing about the leadership training. You've probably seen it in the newsletter. There'll be 4 workshops. It's a little more skill oriented and more particular, like on meetings. Ann and I have been talking about it, and she's had some really good input. Your input is also welcome. And then we'll be doing another program next year. There's some really neat sustainability workshops that, like we did with Kathleen, and she and Ann and Trace are working on having those done in the community. If you want to get engaged, talk to either Trace or Ann about that, to be present if you wish. We are all busy. We are all excited to do good things. So no one's expected to do everything. But doing what we are doing with integrity and with alertness, we will make a difference.